meeting. Good evening and welcome to everybody here. I'm Mary Wheel, Councillor Mary Wheel, Chair of the committee, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. We're being streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and media are also very welcome to watch this meeting remotely. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to remind you all to switch off your devices. We will start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. I've got apologies for absence from Councillor Bennett and Councillor Issa. Any others to note? Thank you very much. Any members have interested to get contact in the week? The minutes of the previous meeting, can I sign those as correct?
Sorry, can I say something on that?
What, a matter of fact or
Arising.
Arising. So can I sign them as correct? Yes. Okay, yes, carry on.
Just to thank Jackie for the action tracker, but the question under page 23, whether when the transformation meeting will happen, because the request was made that there was some piece of feedback by before the end of March. That's what I understood the chief executive to agree to. And in it talks about in the tracker, it talks about the meeting will be arranged in the future.
I've got a meeting with officers next week who report to Maxine to talk about when they could provide a report for the committee. So I've asked if they could consider bringing it to March. The March meeting has changed now, it's slightly earlier, but I'll ask them if they're able to bring something to that meeting.
The other part of that was that in the minutes, I think it refers to the report being to the budget working group, and the tracker talks about being to OSC meeting. The two could be the same, obviously. We're very happy for it to go to OSC, but be clear as to which it's going to be.
I was asking for a report to this meeting. That was my understanding, but it would come to this meeting, so it's a discussion in public. But members of the budget working group are all on this committee, aren't they? You are on the selected chairs.
So it's to the March meeting, this meeting.
That's what I'm asking them to do, but the date's changed, so I want to confirm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now I have agreed for the request to alter the agenda order. So we're going to start with paper A6, the community safety update. So if I can invite Sarah and Stuart to come to the table. Who's going to introduce this?
Well, I wasn't really going to introduce it because I'm going to take it that everybody's read the paper. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank Stuart for this really informative report, which I think clearly outlines what the council's community safety services are. I'm just going to hand over to Stuart to see if he wants to add something.
So I'll be very brief. There's lots of services within the council that deliver community safety outcomes. explicitly or less so. This paper is really focused on the council's community safety services. You'll see the partnership is absolutely central to our ability to deliver our outcomes, not just across the council, but with our external partners, most notably the police. And also, one of the things I wanted to try and get across within the paper is that feelings of safety are kind of subjective, and we need to be really listening to and understanding our residents and our communities and responding to them and to their needs and wishes in the context of their right to feel safe within their public realm and also within their home. I won't say anything more.
Thank you. I'm sure the committee have got lots of questions. So, Craig, shall I start with you?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks very much for the paper. I think it would be remiss of me not to pick up on your first point, Stuart, and say that crime and feeling of safety is a really high issue amongst on the door of its residents, and that feeling of safety and visible policing, I think, is what they want. And I know I've said that before, and you've heard it from many other people, that it's a message that needs to be reinforced at every opportunity, and I'm sure you'll be able to take that back. Question I wanted to ask you, I think, and just delve into a bit more detail. Paragraph 2.2, you introduced a number of issues, including youth violence, and then we go on to 139, where we're talking about St Giles's Trust. And I don't know much about this. I don't know anything about this at all. But I mean, how do we keep the youth sort of safely occupied and away from crime? And how does St Giles's Trust fit into that? Why are they under, and what's the baseline percentage mean? What's the baseline?
So, the youth violence service within community safety services really predominantly focused on, from a delivery perspective, is focused on those young people or young adults who are at significant risk of already living a violent offending lifestyle. So community safety services work with family services and the ECS around the prevention piece as well. But the St Giles Trust is very much a commission service working within the community and working with the most entrenched and young individuals. They tend to be the older age group. So they're commissioned from 16 plus, but they tend to be the older age group. So these are young people who are actively living violent offending lives. The St Giles Trust is an organisation that recruits from a pool of people with lived experience. So in the context of this, we're talking about people who have criminal justice backgrounds, have been the victims of violence, have been the perpetrators of violence, have previous gang associations, and have left that lifestyle and are working with this small group, but this group with very high levels of need, and are credible. And that's the absolute key, that these are individuals who previously have a great deal of life experience and have made that transition out of that lifestyle, and are seeking to support other people who are living that quite entrenched lifestyle. So that's really specialist work. So you think about the kind of the breadth of the youth work or working with young people that you have. These guys are doing some really quite tricky stuff. And the pool of people who could possibly do that and do it safely as well is quite limited. And we're working, the reason why they're amber is because they've struggled to recruit the right person into the right post. And it would be inappropriate, but also might be dangerous if they recruit the wrong person into that post. So we're working with them to make sure that they get the right person into that post. They're still delivering the service, they're just not delivering as much of a service as we have originally commissioned them to deliver. So they are very much at that proper pointy end of what we're trying to do with young people. There's lots of other stuff we do, which will be from across the council, from engagement with young people, which is just about trying to provide positive activities for young people, engagement for young people, and they might not see that as crime diversion or prevention in football or arts and crafts and what have you. That's all part of the range of the kind of offer to young people around trying to keep them occupied and being away from steered along paths into antisocial behaviour.
And there's obviously quite a spectrum for kids from along the path of minor antisocial behaviour to being a county lines team leader.
Yeah.
How do you identify the sort of people who are suitable or need to go to St Giles's Trust?
So
because we're at the lower end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
it's probably casting them.
Yeah, so through the multi-agency partnerships that we've got, so the Youth Violence Reduction Service within the council's community safety team has three workers who work with young people and with young people and their families. But they are linked into a wider network, which will include the offending service and other services within family services and within the voluntary and community sectors. And if you like, there are concentric circles. So there's a wider circle of BCS and community organisations which are engaged by community safety services, which we call the Violence Reduction Network. These are a bunch of people who are out there working with young people, not delivering crime or community safety reduction activities. They're working with young people, but they are sufficiently engaged to know that there is a system and there are support services available. So they will refer people, young people of concern in, and most of the time we work with them to intervene really early so that they don't come to the youth violence reduction service, that we don't see them. So they will be kind of worked with the adolescent service or some of the other services. But there is a network of services which include the VCS, and making sure we're getting out into communities, so communities are aware of our services as well, that are able to respond earlier downstream, so that we're trying to limit the amount of people that we've got upstream at the 28 with the likes of St Giles Trust and some of the other organisations that come up with the commission.
Thank you. I was just going to ask if there was one other point I mentioned, but we didn't cover it. The baseline figure, it's baseline 60%. This is in the Giles Trust at first thought. Baseline 70%. I didn't understand what that was and what that sort of what that relates to, and that might be me being
by example, if we take the first one, so 60% of the service users in 22-23 who were engaged were assessed having reduced risk of harm or involvement in criminality or gang affiliation or exploitation. So a number of measures that we put in place, which we were able to measure that those individuals that engaged with the survey, 60% of them were reduced across those indices.
And on that same one, then 82% in this current year so far, 82%. We're having a beneficial effect on 82% of them, but it's small numbers, obviously.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Thank you.
Lisa, do you have any thoughts?
I was just going to start by asking, in terms of your work with the police, any trends that you have been seeing in crime that have been coming up in engagement, and then also that our crime has gone up more than the London average, and if there's any particular reason why I think that might be the case. And then
So two questions.
yeah.
So crime performance in the first place, so it's 11.5%. The crime's gone up in RBKC compared to, I think, 6.5 is most of London. That's the same case for central London. And if you look at the kind of key crimes for central London, the highest, the volume crime is theft. And then violence. And then if you look for outer London, it tends to be violence and theft is a bit lower. So, and I'll go through some of the kind of key crimes that have gone up and gone down. So with a high footfall, with a lot of the high footfall and historic sites that we have and visitor attractions that we have, we will also attract offenders who come in, and particularly those who are particularly interested in kind of inquisitive crimes. So that would be shoplifting, theft, pickpocketing. We also import burglary as well. So that's kind of part of the challenge of being in the London Borough with a high footfall.
Yeah.
So what was interesting was when COVID hit, we had inner London boroughs had the sharpest decline in crime of the whole of London, and that was because there were no tourists here, so the theft fell through the floor. And theft is the volume theft is what is the largest for central London. If you look at some of the this isn't in your pack, but I've just got the figures here for the same period. So this is January to December last year. Some of the sort of key crimes, things that went up. So burglary went up by 13%. Compared to 5.9% increase across London. Robbery went up by 16% compared to a 22% across the rest of London. And then theft went up by 18% compared to 19% across London. Things that decreased, life crime with injury went down by 7.3 compared to 3.1, and sexual offences by 6.2 to 2.6 reduction. And drug offences were reduced by nearly 10%. So within that, proactive policing will play a part, and particularly proactive policing will play a part around drug offences.
Mm-hmm.
What we're trying to do via the Safer K&C board is bringing the challenge and the support to the police to dig underneath some of the stuff about what is going on, so that we can challenge the police to try and reduce these figures, but also reduce the outcomes, so the number of people that are brought to justice, because the number of people that are brought to justice just across London isn't good enough, and it's certainly not good enough in this borough. So we're trying to work with them. At the moment, it's a complicated picture, and I can't put my hand on my heart and say it's X or Y or Z. So, but we are continuing to work with the cops on that.
Okay, quick, just quickly, so if you keep your answers sort of
I
thing.
will do it.
I was just going to ask, but there's no sort of new rise in crime in terms of certain areas from a safeguarding perspective of educating residents?
Nothing
That, okay.
No.
Thank you. So I see that we have some programs around youth violence and exploitation, and also violence against women and girls. And I'm wondering, do we have anything in place specifically? And I appreciate it may not be within your remit, but if it is, do we have anything in place around the sexual exploitation of young women and girls and harassment?
So, yes, is the short answer. So, you'll be aware of family services have statutory responsibilities in the context of safeguarding children. So there's the responsibilities that they have and the work that they do. Within community safety, we commission all of the specialist domestic abuse services, violence against women and girls services. One of the main provider or group of providers is a consortium of 9 providers called the Angelou Partnership. We commission the Angelou Partnership, and as part of that, one of those organisations we commission is called Advance, and they are funded to provide domestic abuse services, but also to provide independent sexual violence advocate services, and that's for women and girls. That's 13 plus. Obviously, if there's a child involved, they'll be working incredibly closely with children's services and under the statutory requirements of child safeguarding. There's also the London-wide Rape Crisis Service, which is commissioned by MOPAC, but all Londoners are able to access that service, and we promote that service locally. We commission organisations to do work in schools around healthy relationships and trying to make sure that we are giving young people the best start around healthy relationships, that we're trying to prevent sexual exploitation and sexual violence at a much younger level. We have a pilot around the national referral mechanism for modern slavery for children, which provides the opportunity to take basically decision making is being devolved to us at the local level, so that the decision making which would hitherto be undertaken by the Home Office is now being undertaken locally. That gives us a better response. We have specialist youth workers working with young women who are victims of or involved in gang activity and may have been victims of sexual violence or sexual exploitation. As St Giles Trust have got a dedicated women's worker, girls worker. And then there's the kind of universal stuff that we do to try and work within public realm, to keep the public realm safe. There's quite a bit going on in that world, but partnership is the centre.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Portia, you had any?
My question was, Councillor Ammon, you touched upon it, but I can expand on it. I mean, 2.21, the main objective of this program is to reduce offence and crime. Now, how are these services only assessed by agencies? Can they have self-referral? I mean, would you get parents involved with seeing their children displaying some sort of difficulties at home? Is that sort of service available?
Yeah, absolutely.
How is it advertised?
Yeah, so we commissioned the Dare Trust to do to be parents champions and to go out. So we train a group of parents, and they work within the community to raise awareness around the issues, about services, and support parents to make referrals. So that's very much, we will take self-referrals from families, and families do refer to us, and individuals refer to us. And how we promote this is a myriad of different things, information on the council's website, but really what we do is go out into communities and speak to people. So we did a conference last year called It Takes a Village, and we invited local parents into that, as well as young people and providers and a range of other folk. So we do lots of things out in the community, having conversations.
Thank you.
And we've got our
Sydney.
community conversations coming up in which,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sydney, have you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I've got about 4 things. I'll try and keep them brief if I can. The first one is on bottom of page 131, so 2.16, and it refers to the hate crime element. We know that the Home Office is cutting the grant or cutting funding, and I noticed that on page 79 there's additional funding going to be put into dealing with prevent for the Home Office specifically. So my question around hate crime is, how many people do you have in your team that are looking at hate crime specifically? Because it wasn't clear in your organogram that anybody was actually looking and dealing with hate crimes. That's my first question.
I can respond to that one.
Yeah, quite quickly. So yes, Laura Platt is the coordinator for hate crime. It's probably not written in the deal.
So it's not in your organogram, but there is somebody there.
There is
Okay.
someone there.
Then answer that one.
Yeah, okay. And then my follow-on question is, the organogram gives some indication of vacancies, but doesn't seem to have what I would call total headcount. This is on page 136. Could you give us some indication as to how many people you would need for it to be fully staffed to cover all of the gaps and bases that you may actually see being required for the total coverage for the whole council? And how many people your headcount is at now, so that we can get an understanding that in next year's, if you're say at 80%, you still have a shortfall.
So there's three vacancies within the parks place.
Yeah.
The community safety manager, AST, delivery and strategy is vacant.
And the one below that as well.
And the officer below that, but the advert for the manager is live. The new post holder is due within the month for the ASB community development stuff, and offers have been made to three applicants for the participants. So in the process of recruiting, and I think, you know, with a fair winds by summer, we should be first in.
Because my concern therefore is that you've got sort of quite detailed work there on antisocial behaviour that doesn't appear to have anybody doing the work because they're both vacant and there doesn't seem that there's any coverage. Then that was what my concern was. But if you're saying that there's somebody covering it and you're actively recruiting, that'd be useful to indicate in this diagram. And then my final one is probably a good news story. We had some issues in Redcliffe where drug dealers were operating out of a building where the police have now gone. And it follows on to CCTV, which you've got mentioned at the top of page 131 in the final bullet point. To what extent that you've got data on burglary, on knife crime and various others, to what extent are we sending personnel to try and prevent some of these things happening before they arise to crimes? And to use your examples that you've got in here in the appendices on page 135, you're showing that top burglary wards are Brompton, Hansdown, Camden and Redcliffe.
Yeah.
And you're showing that the top violence against the person wards on 134, Dalgarno, Goldbourne and Colville. Are you deploying the assets that you can control to those areas at the times where you can prevent those things from happening?
So this intelligence feeds into a weekly tasking meeting as alongside the most latest intelligence.
Weekly tasking between whom and whom?
So all of the council's enforcement services and the police, and that is used to task those officers, be it police or council, to address those issues. You'll see the officers that I have in the organogram are not really officers that put uniforms on and go out, apart from the parks police, and those that uniform on every day. But the others aren't really operational officers that will put a uniform on and go out into the street and try and prevent burglary. They're the ones who coordinate the partnership around those type of issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then the final question, if I may, Chair, is CCTV. We've got CCTV. I think the figure was 900 CCTV cameras on council properties. That may be high. I'm not sure about the figure that I can recall. To what extent is that particular resource being shared with the police to prevent some of these crimes taking place? If we have the resources there.
Yeah, so our housing colleagues are very much linked in with the police. The CCTV cameras are not, the majority of their CCTV cameras, housing CCTV cameras, are not actively monitored. Some are actively monitored. Nevertheless, they're all recording. And the housing are linked into the police and will share their CCTV with the police where they're quite more concerned. But they link in with the police. It's slightly different for public realm CCTV, which is being actively monitored for half of the day, and for which there is direct comms link into the police, and the police will contact our CCTV and they will intervene and film in live crime concerns or issues.
So on page 136, sorry, Chair, you've got a CCTV officer specified in the organogram. What is the scope of their work?
Their work is with trying to coordinate all of the CCTV installations, make sure when there's a CCTV camera that might fail, that they're coordinating and making sure that they're correct.
In the public realm or in the housing stock?
No, the housing stock is separate.
It's separate.
Yeah, we haven't got responsibility for the housing stock.
Right.
That's managed by Housing Management Services. It's just the public realm cameras that we've got.
I think there's that one thing there that every meeting I go to with the police, they keep saying how important it is for people to report crime. So the tasking is based on information. So if people aren't reporting it, you're not putting the resource in. So it's really anybody you speak to, please ask them to, they must report the crime.
Thank you, sorry. Well,
Thank you.
thank you. I think the issue
Picked one of my questions. I have two more. Oh, that's great. I have two more. One of them is on page 136, and it follows on from what Cindy was talking about. With these vacancies, have we considered, is there a possibility of actually, instead of hiring a new person, the jobs are getting shared or used by, or done by people who are already existing in a similar, because if you look at it, it's similar groupings. Could these jobs be fulfilled by existing people? Or do we have to hire new people? Because it is a lot easier to share a job, split a job, spread it around than actually.
I think I would say that actually the community safety team is a small team. It's a very effective small team. They work across the council, and I honestly don't think we cannot recruit these posts.
Thank you. Thank you. And my second question is on the stats on page 134 and 135. And I'm predominantly concerned about Brompton and Hampstown, where we have the highest seems to be. Is blue the highest rate?
Yes.
So we like the bluest people, which is I'm proud of course, but still not that kind of group. And I was wondering, what are we doing? What are we doing in mitigating and in preventing some of these? You said earlier that some of the burglaries and robberies reduced during COVID because we had short football. Mm-hmm. But now everything is back to normal. What are we doing aside of reporting, telling people to be careful? A lot of people stop carrying handbags and wearing watches.
So Brompton and Hampstown is a priority for policing. It's going to have its own sergeant, whereas a lot of the other boroughs will have to share a sergeant. The police have said that the police are committed to increasing the numbers within Navy policing. They haven't confirmed the details of where they'll be allocated, but I can't help but believe that there'll be an uplift in officers within Brompton and Hampstown. So it gets an awful lot of attention from the police and from the partnership. I think there's a unique kind of set of challenges there, given that we've spoken about the high footfall already, we've spoken about the tube station that's in, tube stations as well are drivers. I'm open to suggestions about more that we can do within that area, and I really am. As long as I've been doing this job, Brompton and Hampstown has always been the ward that's experienced the highest levels of crime.
Thank you.
Well,
One question, with the implementation of the street enforcement team and the Metropolitan Police's commitment to neighbourhood policing and linking up with, for instance, the Kingsway Partnership, what's the position of Parks Police? How should they go to be coordinated into this close collaboration? And in fact, would it be better for Parks Police to be positioned within the street enforcement team?
Well, Parks Police will consider this part of the quest review. And I think the proposal we thought it was considered at the beginning that they would transfer to transform regulatory services. I think there's ongoing discussions about that. So that might well be the case.
When we had police briefing today, the police man who was coordinating 9 wards, he was saying that the bringing things together is now as important as having increased people on the street, linking up comms, etc. So having less entities would be a useful game.
Yeah.
Cindy, did you want to?
Just one final question. Does your brief look at businesses and theft, shoplifting from businesses at all?
We do work with businesses, and we work with
Wasn't anything on businesses?
yeah, no, there isn't anything in business. So there isn't. I haven't got an officer that has priority for working with businesses. But we do work and engage with the bids, and we work with businesses. But it isn't prioritised.
And probably the council's facilitation of the bids has been the greatest support that we have offered to the businesses against shoplifting. Sort of 3 or 4 years. Okay, can I just ask, a lot of this is dependent on our good relations with the police, and that ebbs and flows over the years, depending on personnel. So I just wondered what sort of state we were in now and how we coordinate that and how we deal with the lows. And also we've talked today about the briefing sessions that are done, I think, fortnightly, of how we deploy our own teams. I think councillors aren't aware enough of that and don't know that they can have an input. Now, obviously, don't want to be flooded with it, but do think there's a case for making it more widely known so that people who are concerned about a drug problem in their area know that they can come to you and tell you about it, because they might not bother to otherwise.
Well, certainly, I'm very keen to take any kind of query or request from councillors, and some councillors contact me quite regularly, so I'm very happy to kind of continue that and to promote that. But we will, as a service, will respond to councillors. In response to your first part of your question, which is about relationship with the police, I think the relationship with the police is very good. I think we bring a healthy challenge to the police, but with a very high level of collaboration in the work that we do. And I think that's both on the front line, but right the way through the organisation. I see part of my responsibilities is making sure that each part of the council that needs to lock onto the police is able to lock onto the police and effectively in doing so. So part of what I do is kind of troubleshoot of various points to make sure that my colleagues can effectively engage with the police. I think that's going well at the moment. It's like spinning plates. You need to keep doing it. And at the most senior level, the borough commander is engaged with the leader and chief executive with Sarah on a periodic basis. So I think at each level we are engaged with the police. There are tensions within that relationship. There's no doubt about that. And I think it's healthy. That would be my view.
Thank you. Well, with the committee's permission, I might draw this to an end, but just sort of draw out three particular issues. I think there's been a lot of discussion about data and how are we using it productively enough. I mean, something that Wala mentioned, we're using it productively enough to prevent crime and as well as to track what's going on. I think Will has essentially made a recommendation about making sure that we, prioritising integration and working together.
Maybe move part of this centrally in our new street.
And I think I'd like to suggest that we are much more transparent about the briefings that go on, and the fact that councillors have, I think it's the clued up councillors who found out what's going on who ask you to try to influence the tasking. And I think it would be a good idea if more people knew about it and how to go about it. So with those three thoughts, thank you very much. Unless I've got something, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm now going to mess with the running on this, and now I'm going to go back to the Q3 revenue and capital financial monitoring report. So welcome to Lisa, Amanda and Jenny. Thank you very much. Is that the report?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is a lot that's new to say about this report, because the big, the sort of the overall picture is informed by the elongation of existing trends. We're reporting a slightly bigger overspending. That is a concern. It's driven by homelessness and by treasury management. The former is a really big structural problem across London, as we've talked about before, and work will probably continue to try and reduce the moral and the financial implications of increased costs of homelessness.
Thank you. Okay, shall I start? Let's go with, of course, I'm sure, yeah, start Paula. Yeah, okay. I got a couple of, how many questions am I allowed?
Depends how succinct you are.
I've got a couple of just kind of like small questions. The first one is on page 38. And it's in 1.5. Do we have, it says, at the very end, it says, inflation on some one-off short-term items. Do we have a limit of those one-off short-term items, or is it one, when you say one-off, it's like 3 one-offs, 5 one-offs, or indefinite?
Answer one at a time. Sorry, shall I answer one question at a time?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be good. So yeah, I can refer you to section 19 of the report. We actually detail further there the contingency and the centrally held budgets. And section 19 is on page 63 of the pack. So that is talking about. So in there you can see a breakdown of the contingency budget, which started at 3.719 million at the start of the year. And at 19.2, you can see how the commitments against that. And then at 19.4, you can see the centrally held budget for 7.9 million. And again, you can see the breakdown at 19.5, with 4.3 million being the original element earmarked pay inflation. Hopefully that just gives you a bit more detail in that section.
And that's, yeah. On page 46, item 11.4. Can you tell me a little bit more about that case and why?
So this is the legal case.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
I suggest we take that one offline. I don't know the detail for the record, but I'm loath to discuss individual cases at committees anyway. So I suggest that we do
But this
interrogate
is a
it.
public document, and if people FOI it, what are they going to get?
I don't know. In some cases, FOIs are redacted. So I don't know the detail of the.
The point is that it's a very significant amount, isn't
yeah.
it? And represents a risk
Yeah.
that it's getting up. I mean, I think
Yeah,
it's about the risk of it getting bigger.
Yeah, it's a reasonable. The question about why the cost is as it is very reasonable. The level of detail we can give, I can't say without knowing the detail, and it may be that we can't if the detail is of a certain nature.
Well, did you have another?
Yeah, I do. In page 70, you have on item 23.2, it says, I was just wondering, what are the pros and cons for this? What's the uplift? What if there is a negatives and positives? What are they?
Sorry, which paragraph?
It's in 23.2. I mean, particularly, I'm looking at the Department of Education intent to incorporate the MSAG into core budget allocations.
Yeah.
What is this? What's the positive and what are the negatives of doing that?
Yeah. So so this current year, the Department for Education during the year gave some additional grant funding for mainstream schools, additional grants. And what we're saying there is from next year, so starting in April 2024, rather than giving it during the year, they'll put it into the budget at the start of the year, so it'll be in the base budget. So schools will know that that element is coming from the start rather than during the year, so it'll help with planning.
Okay.
The benefit of it is there's more funding available.
Okay. And I promise this is my last. 23.6. And you're talking here, it's ring fenced until to the end of March 2026. We say 2026, but it's not that far away, is it? So, how are we going to work towards meeting it?
So at the moment, the cumulative deficit on the dedicated schools grant, the estimate by 2026 is 3.3 million. We are seeing that come down quite significantly to where it was previously. But there are two things. One is to continue to try and drive that down quicker, and then two will be making a provision in the medium-term financial plan to fund that. If that ring fence is removed, it has to be funded from general fund reserves or from budget. So we need to make a provision for that.
And I see there's quite a few things that we intend to fund from reserves.
Yeah.
So where is that going to leave us long term?
That is a risk. I mean, we have finite reserves. In cases like this where things that were previously ring-fenced to now part of the kind of general base budget, that forms part of the gap over the medium term. And we can plug the gap either through I suppose tax rises of various natures, through reducing our spending, which is kind of things like transformation, better use of capital assets, fees and charges, or we can increase our borrowing. But obviously that's not an approach I would recommend. So there are a limited number of levers available to us, and where ring fences end, we do have to make provision for them. So when we present gaps to you pretty frequently, these are the sorts of things that contribute to that gap.
Thank you. So there, Mr. Rapp, which is in.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. Page 72, paragraphs 24.2 in relation to section 106. You've allocated 13.746 million. Of course, there's going to be some money left. I think if I look further in the papers, you can find what it looks like in terms of forecast. Just want to get a sense of how that money is going to be spent over the next few years to help residents in the borough, because that's money that's supposed to be, as I understand it, spent on improving the lives of residents. So I just want to get first questions on 106.
Yeah, absolutely. Table 20 on page 72 sets out different allocations against the section 106 funding that we have. There are lots of great schemes in there. So, for example, improvements to Kensington Memorial Park. It's quite a big scheme that's already underway. We've got about £1.1 million in the budget overall for that. I can see that a component of that funding is section 106, but if you go down there now, you can see work that's already begun on a new cafe in the blue area. The first net zero playground, which is great. We can see that there's lots allocated to new homes. Housing is kind of the number one issue arising from Grenfell, and that the council has to get right. So the delivery of new, safe, affordable homes is a total council priority. So it's good that that's earmarked. That's where you can see in education there are earmarks. So I would refer residents who are interested in this to table 20. We have an ambitious programme, which is a good thing. If there are things you think we should consider, then let us know. Obviously, there are some constraints on 106 funding. Depending on the agreement, it could be hypothecized for a certain kind of policy area or a certain geographical area. But sometimes they're less restricted and we can be more flexible.
Okay, thank you. And then the follow-on question was on page 79. It doesn't have any lines on the table, but I'm looking at the last two entries, starting with the bottom one, funding for preventing following cessation of homeowners grant, which I think has got 98,000 budgeted for 24-25, and then asking them what happens after that. It seems to have zeros, and is that going to come from somewhere else? This dealing with hate crime, and that's clearly important. It's important enough for us to put money in 24-25, but where's it going to come from going forward?
I think
Amanda, sorry, can you speak up? Sorry.
Yeah, the intention is for that to be funded from public health and an application in.
Thank you.
Sorry, was this funded as part of a public health application, the existing fund?
No, so this would be a one-off injection just to bridge the gap between the grants, I think.
Sorry.
Okay. So then the follow-up question, of course, is hate crime is very, very important. We tackle that. if we don't get the grant from public health, what is the provision? Because as Johnny said, I think earlier, if you're taking money from reserves and the reserves have gone, you've got no money in reserves.
Yeah.
So what is our plan if we don't get that money?
The plan would be, it seems to build it into the base budget or to fund it in an ongoing way from reserves, but there are very few reserves that we would, if any, that we would agree to fund in an ongoing way. So in practice, we would build it into the base budget.
And then the final question then on the line above, it seems to be, if I've read this correctly, a time-limited parks officer to explore income generation opportunities. And I'm just looking at the numbers. Isn't that exactly what the business development team of the council are already doing? We've already got an asset portfolio. Have we already got people looking at how we can maximise revenue from our existing portfolio? Why have we got to get a parks officer specifically? I'm just a bit confused. I mean, residents have said, well, that doesn't look like a particularly good use of money and cost of living prices. Because I'm just looking at parks.
So I think this is to provide additional capacity, specifically looking at parks. They need more capacity to drive this piece of work forward for that period of time. The long-term approach would be hopefully that would be self-funding, so they would generate income coming in from that post, but you need to pump prime it at the start to get it up and running.
Okay, so then the next question is, what have we been doing for our parks for the last 10, 15, 20 years? We've had them for a long time. How have we been generating revenue for them so far?
That's a good question that I don't know the detailed answer to, but I think this is to drive it harder and faster.
I mean, I can see that the thrust of your question is that we should be able to do this in-house without adding additional headcount and officer resource.
Yeah.
It's a
coming out of the reserve as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a reasonable concern. I spend a lot of my time, particularly when I'm in with the whole leadership team on a Thursday, saying to them that we're depleting our reserves more quickly than I'd like, that we need to be more disciplined in each of our business areas, and ensure that we're using reserves when it's genuinely needed, when it is genuinely one-off, and when we really can't do it in the house. And there are examples that I push back on all the time. We have changed some of the terms of references of different reserves to try and constrain the kind of occasionally, loose use of reserves. If you think when you look at budgets like this that there are further examples of that, or that I didn't get the outcome I should have from those interrogations, then I think you should take it up with me and with the members, because I think the general aspiration would be to drive down unnecessary one-off use of reserves. I don't always win the argument in the leadership team. That's life, that's politics, that's how it goes. But the more eyes we have on this stuff, the better. And the impulse, which is to drive down the use of reserves where it's not completely necessary, is absolutely the right one, given the trend.
Yeah. So, I mean, if this is, sorry to interrupt, but if this is £47,000 in 24-25, could you direct me to what revenue we're generating from venue hire and parks currently, and what that number looks like?
We can take that
away.
away.
Yeah, you can take that away. Why doesn't the committee, not to do your job for you, but if you want to minute it as a question to get a proper answer, so that we can come back, because I agree. I mean, it may be that we can't give you that, but if we can't, you're right, you flash the light on a problem.
I think it's part of the wider issue of spend to save and tracking that the savings actually are achieved, which we've talked about before, and I think we have agreed that there will be in future reports on spend to save projects to track that the savings are achieved, and I think that's something that the working group had budget working group had suggested. So that's fine. Greg.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've got a few reflections, which will be questions and some of them just reflections. The first one, below the level of this report, I am going to welcome the government's team's replacement of bottled water with tap water. I think that's going to be a big saving over the course of the year. But I say that in public because after you finish your answers, I'm going to get one, and I don't want to be considered rude when I get in the table. I think looking through the budget, thank you for the paper. I think we've got good news on the HRA revenue. The underspend there means more for capital, the capital programme or less borrowing, but obviously we've got bad news to be already reflected on the TA problem that's not going away. First one's probably a question on page 55. The digital data and technology overspend has increased, but not unusual for government departments to underestimate the cost of IT programs, so I'm just wondering why that's going up, and it's kind of concerning. Page 66, the next reflection I have is the accuracy of forecast on capital spend. It's either we're not very good at forecasting or not, we're not very good at delivering the capital program. And that's certainly not a new issue, that things get pushed to the right. And I wonder if there's some way we could be a bit more accurate in the future. Page 67, I noticed that it occurred to me that the historic built assets line appears there, and we've had some good effect from that in the current year. 2 projects delivered, and there's more in the capital pipeline, and I'd certainly be expecting some more funding to be drawn down in the next financial year or 2, because I know there's some projects coming on, but it's good to see that there in the budget. On page 79, I want to welcome the funding for the rapid dump through traffic light line. That's a really significant problem. Certainly in my view, around South Kensington generally, the wider South Kensington area, I think that's got the potential to make a real difference. So I thank you for funding it and making that decision now. Finally, a question I've asked before, which is page 80. We're still not spending the borough server. It's sort of sat there waiting to be used. I have asked the question before, and I would like to make some progress spending the money that's there to be used on beneficial ends for it. So those are a few reflections that me, and over to you. Come back to me, John.
Yeah, well, why don't you start with page 55 and let's go through this question.
Okay, so page 55, we lots of the digital data and technology and spend. So a large element of that this year is around Microsoft contract pressures and increased costs above what we budgeted for. So that's built in there as part of our forecast. So that's what's driving that overspend in the year.
It does worry me that government IT projects, generally, whatever element of it, have a habit of overspending. I mean, this is probably not the most spectacularly bad example across the whole of government, by no means is it.
Yeah.
But it is a concern, I think.
Yeah, I share your concern.
Yeah. And we're working closely with digital, and in fact, only speaking to them just last week about driving down some forecast overspends they had, and they've driven those down quite significantly. So we are putting quite a lot of pressure on them, but yeah, recognise what you say, absolutely.
Next was page 66, I believe.
This is around the capital spending. So capital is really hard to forecast, and we'll never get it completely accurate. That's not a bad variance considering the size of the capital programme. There's been a lot of work taking place this year, and we talk about it a little bit higher up in 21.3 around the establishment of the programme management office, and members as well have been working with us closely to review the capital programme. We've set up some measures. There's a capital programme board tomorrow to look at things. So we've got a lot more rigour in place now around things actually entering the capital programme and timing of those things entering the capital programme. But just due to the nature of the schemes in the capital programme, some of them get delayed because once they get on site, they find there's other things that need investigating. So that slows the project down, or there might be other interdependencies. So sometimes, for example, schools, we don't finish things in school holidays, or they can't start because there's not enough time with the children being at school. So it slips again, but there is a lot of light being shone on the capital programme and timing with that. Well, to manage expectations, it will never be 100% state, but I think that is a much better place than it has.
What do officers regard as a reasonable variance? Because you've described this as an acceptable.
I would say between 10 and 15%.
Helpful information of that. In terms of historical features, I very much hope that at the budget meeting you will give your annual roundup of that item. It's one that I think is going well, and I'm pleased there's money in the pipeline. Am I right? Next was Some crazy, yeah, I mean,
Don't necessarily just glance, it was more of a comment. So
no, I want to, I want to evangelise about the benefits of this approach. I know that cleaning our streets, tackling graffiti, litter, all of this kind of stuff is pretty much number one for probably a plurality of constituents, certainly in my ward and probably in many of your wards. I also understand that for members, I certainly know in my group, it's probably the single thing that we bring up the most. When we're not thinking about the kind of overarching narrative around piece around, some of the first implementing COVID and trying to make sure that our responses are as effective and humane as possible. But no, absolutely, it's a great thing to invest in. I know that we've issued more notices on street enforcement over the past couple of weeks than any month in kind of the history of the world.
Yeah.
That reflects the leadership team's total focus on these matters. And I welcome it.
Yeah, can I move on to Lucy?
I firstly wanted to welcome 10.1 that you're forecasting understanding around 48,000 people through this movement of 71 food. And I just wanted to say that despite pressures, we still feel more or less in balance on ANC. But how confident are we about managing the future pressures we might face? And are we in a solid position if uncertainties do present themselves due to economic pressures? And then the other point I wanted to make was regarding page 38. Yes. And you say that strategic decisions will be needed to determine how best to utilize limited resources to have the greatest impact in line with the priorities of the council plan. How are these decisions made, and what are the key areas of priority we do mention in it?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say on the first one is a big thank you to adult social care officers and the teams that are working on it, because it's a really challenging area. Like you've identified, there are significant pressures, and I know that there are a lot of boroughs across London who are overspending in that area. So actually, we're probably an outlier in that way, in that we've managed the budget really well over a long period of time, and are still doing our best to deliver the best service possible. In terms of detail.
So you're confident?
No, I mean, it's not to say that we're kind of, I think these are still serious pressures. Over the past few years, the pressures seem to have intensified, and so we need to be, I think, alert and to continue to manage these pressures as best we can. So I think confident would be overstating it, but we are alert to the threat of increasing pressures.
Mm-hmm. I think just to add to that, obviously the budget that came to leadership earlier this month and is going to full council next week. We have to set a budget that we think is realistic, and section 151 officer Mike Curtis has a statement in there. It's called a section 25 statement that says at that point in time he considers that budget to be robust, and he's written that it's based on the budget that we've set. I think what we would like to recognise is very late in the process, we got an additional funding. So the government announced £600 million, of which we got 1.8 million for social care, both adults and children. That's obviously really, really welcome. And I think that will help with the pressures. What we will do, like any other budget each year, is we will monitor it regularly throughout the year. And we can see that there are pressures. Obviously, we'll try to put things in place to mitigate those pressures. But at the point of setting the budget, we feel that is a realistic budget. I can't say what's going to happen in the market, but we'll keep a very close eye on it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Claire.
Thank you. I wanted to start. I've got 4 questions to do as quickly as I can. So on page around 51, 13.4. I wanted to ask, what are the extra security costs at Bowmore Road? And why is there an increased demand for repairs?
I think that's a really detailed question.
Right.
Can we take that away and
Certainly,
provide
certainly.
written response?
Because we have an understanding.
Yeah.
It's partially offset by the overspending rent
Yeah.
for housing. Now, Beaumont Road, which is in my ward, is quite small.
Mhm.
I'm not aware of extra security costs that might come to an overspend of £124,000. And I'm also wondering what the increased resident demand for repair services is. Is that to do with Beaumont Road or is it general? Maybe that's a more detailed question.
We'll take that away, get
Okay.
you an answer, and
Thank
if we can, and we feel you need to, we will include that paragraph for the leadership report in
Right.
March.
Thank you. Page 59, 17.2. You have a forecast unspent rental recovery revenue. And the balance is being transferred to reserves, which I understand is refunds. And I'm wondering what happens to those reserves, because I think they have been unspent in previous years also. And I'm wondering, do we know what the decision making is around those reserves?
Yes, so yes, you're right, there has been unspent in the past, and the ring fence is for Grenfell recovery. So all of the unspents keep going back into the same pot, the recovery pot. And there will need to be decisions made, a bit like the items that are listed in this table already for future spend by the Grenfell team. But it is ring fence for Grenfell.
So as far as we know, it just keeps going into that reserve. It hasn't gone out.
It's all going into that reserve.
Thank you. Page 67. New capital, table 15, new capital programme funding requests. I see the funding request for Nottingdale Future Neighbourhood 2030 phase 1 and 2. And I'm wondering what the timing is for those. Have I understood the table correctly? Because phase 1 is completed. Phase 2 is very nearly completed. And yet we are putting in a funding request. Maybe that's a more detailed question.
Yes, we don't know the specific answer around the timeline, but we are funding those elements grants we've received from government.
That's right, and match funding.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, phase 1 was completed last year.
So you're wondering why it's in this?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, why don't we take that away and get you an answer?
Thank you for that one. And then finally, in Appendix A, 3112. Appendix 4, sorry, my mistake. I'm seeing forecast variance 17310 for Lancaster West Main refurbishment. Does that amount to an overspend? Based on overspend relative to forecast?
So the second line
Yeah.
on the table.
Yeah.
So the original budget was 23
Yeah.
million. The revised budget earlier in the year was brought down to 5 million because they thought they were going to work. The work would be done slower. Now we're proposing to bring the money back in, 17 million, so it's a environment back in. So the scheme's got going quicker again. So therefore the outturn and the forecast is 22 million.
That's all a matter of dating.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, understood. Thank you very much for that. I think that's all my
Thank you,
questions.
Portia.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'm just very intrigued by 10.1. We all know that adult and social care is increasing in high demand as we speak, based on our public health report. And I was just wondering, how did you manage to have an underspend of 178K for Q3, which is positive compared to Q2? What was done differently in order to achieve this outcome?
Yeah, so paragraph 10.2 and 10.3 below give you a little bit more detail on the unspent. So predominantly there are a number of vacancies within the service that are driving that unspent as well. So there's detail there about additional funding that came in during the year, and also less staff than we had budgeted for various reasons.
let's start.
You're right, it should be fewer.
And
I'm
also,
biting my lip, very
Sorry, if I use.
so what's that? So, let's, okay, yeah. Can I just ask another question? What percentage of your staff is agency and how many are contracted?
Definitely have to take that away as a detailed question.
We have to take that, but I remember from the last time I saw it that ASC have driven down their use of
Massively,
agency.
yeah.
They're probably the most effective department in the council at doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, generally agency costs are higher. There are some areas in the council where you need agency because of the flexibility that gives you and the short-term nature of different roles. But ASC, they're probably the exemplar. So when we get that detail to you,
Yeah.
I think we'll be more concerned about other departments than ASC.
And the
Especially like that.
It is a small number now, like
It is.
a couple of dozen, but I can't tell you the percentage because
I think we find that quite reassuring. So,
Thank you.
well,
I had a myriad of detailed points, but I'd like to ask two questions. One, to try to wrap up some of the detail and more general point. Across the piece, quarter three, having read it, reread it, and reread it, we tried to look at what were one-off either reductions in expenditure or incomes that weren't anticipated. We seem to rescue the day together with the use of reserves. But the underlying pressures seem to be growing, and emphasising that we're going to spend at the end of this is 3.296 million. Temporary accommodation is obviously the main element of the room, but despite that, there are pressures in every single department. And together with the council plan moving into the council action plan, which aims to produce better outcomes for our residents, those two things together, do you agree that transformations are both urgent, the Help 25/6 budget in particular, but also that they have to be more than just looking for further cuts? They have to be new ways of doing business, refocusing on what we actually want to do as a council, thinking strategically rather than just tactically. Because the salami slicing of cuts from your predecessor, Lisa Taylor, asked that question, put that date on it. And cuts are no longer the culture which will get us through to the campaign.
I think our answer would emphatically be yes.
Right. And if I could ask a supplementary in 2311, page 71, you could turn to it. The second part of the page is obviously an outstanding element, which says, can you add a paragraph to say what has been done to support them? Could you please do that now?
That's just me. So I did spot that, and you can see I've highlighted it there tonight. So we are asking that question. So I can say a little bit, but I can't tell you masses. We will update the report for leadership. So it is our schools team, and they are working as they do in all schools. Those 12 schools are expected to be in deficit. They'll be working with them individually to try and understand what's driving that deficit. Are there efficiencies they can make? And that's the sort of paragraph I wanted added in that report. So apologies that got missed when we did our last.
I should have declared an interest with regard to those two. I'm governor of two schools, but what I have with things like Schools Forward is that it's quite extraordinary the range of deficit carryover positions that different schools are in. And it makes me wonder as to whether there's some transformation going on, which would be useful to shed a light on. FCS first.
Yeah, and the above in paragraph 23.9, it tells you about what the Education Skills Funding Agency referred to as balances for different types of schools. So all of that, you're right, is contained.
It's also what schools do, how they manage themselves, how they manage their premises, how they work with partners, a whole range of different things. They're becoming more local centres for the population rather than just educational establishments. And they're probably the first port to look for early stage interventions for mental health and physical health.
But we will get a paragraph added. It's fine.
anything else?
That's it. Yes, we really.
Yeah, it's characteristic rigor from the chairman of our local group team.
I have noticed that in this budget there are quite a lot of violence So one suggestion I was going to make was in 27.7, we've got some indicators for the development plan. And whether it might be an idea in table 28 to include an indicator of the percentage of violence that are going on in budgets. Because they are essentially an indicator that the budget hasn't been got quite right, but they tend to get hidden within the reporting. I don't mean deliberately hidden, but they're just not obvious. Within that.
So happy to, that whole section, finance performance indicators, section 27 is a new section. Pretty much this year, so happy to take any recommendations for things.
So I was just suggesting that that's another perhaps indicator of budgeting health. In 25.2, and this is me with my liberal calculator, I worked out that about 16%. At this stage of the year, about 16% of the budget savings have been deemed unachievable, which is, I think, quite a lot. And we've been talking earlier about what's an acceptable range of things. And I wondered, this early by the third quarter, we're saying 16% we're just not going to make. At least I think I've read that quite correctly. Is that saying something about our budgeting being over optimistic at the beginning of the year? And is it, should we be aiming for that to be 5%? Or, of course, it's going to happen sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a bit high.
It can also reflect inflationary pressures that have occurred during the year.
But if they're about specific savings, yes, there may be a combination of increased demand as well.
Or a slow implementation of investor savings.
So we would like to see that, obviously, as all savings achieved during the year. We need to recognise that when we set this budget around February time, things do change. So if you look in Appendix 1, you've got the detail of which ones are currently achieving. And some of those mainly because it's timing as well. So, but we do have rigour on those all of the time.
I think it might be useful to have that as a clear percentage. And if you feel the need to say that some of this is due to increased demand or program slippage, that might be helpful as well, Captain. I'm just going back, I slightly pulled on about this before, but we've moved the contingency out of the revenue budget and into reserves, and we're going to spend that contingency in full this year, which is not surprising given the pressures. Do we think that this is a good thing to go on using the reserve as our contingency? Because I would hazard that it isn't.
So the move to reserves is 1 year only.
Okay.
And is as a result of last year underspending. We had an underspend at the end of 22-23. We'd already set the budget for 23-24. So we moved over 5 million of that underspend into the reserve for contingency, which meant for 24-5, the year we're going into next year, we could release the element we had in the medium-term financial strategy for contingency, as we've gotten it in reserve, but for 25-26, we shot it back in the medium-term financial strategy. So it's a one-off use that makes reserves to release the pressure a little bit on the revenue budget.
Thank you. My final question.
But it's okay. It's releasing the pressure only for 1 year.
Yes, it only released it for 1 year.
The thing I'm trying to get across is that this is not a static analysis situation. It's a dynamic situation. Said it far too many times. Probably. I really think that the coffee needs to be smelt with regards to 25-6.
Yes, and we've started, you'll see in the budget report,
the gap has started already.
The gap for 25-26, and we've already started work on closing that gap.
And I'd just like to ask one more question, and that relates to 1.3, and this is the Treasury pressure. And I did read the further explanation in section 18, but I'm embarrassed to say I still didn't understand it. We've got a pressure because we've got low cash reserves because we've used our cash instead of borrowing. But surely we've only done that because we're going to save money by doing it.
So, yes, but we were assuming we would earn more money. There was a greater earning on the money we had sitting in the balances than we would pay out for general for borrowing. So the two offsetting each other is an impact that's not a good impact for the council. So you have to look at the two together.
Yes, so looking at the two together, I can't work out why we've taken the course we have, if it's costing us more money, but.
I would have to refer that to the treasury team.
Right.
The treasury doesn't come under my portfolio, but I'm happy to refer that and get you an answer.
Because to me, and I admit I may just have misread it, it looks like we've chosen the more expensive treasury management option, which has cost us money. And I can't work out why we've done that. And there may be a good reason.
Okay, well, I won't guess, I'll come back to you and answer.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you.
So just going to switch page we're on that one.
37.
37 on 1.3.
It was paragraph 1.2.
But it's then explained.
Oh, the explanation, because I think, is there a table?
Yeah, page 62 has more details.
Yes.
Section 18, but still didn't understand it.
Because I think what I liked about that table on page 62 is that it separates out, as I requested several meetings ago, the interest payable and the interest receivable, and that made it much more understandable for me. So I do want to say thank you for reflecting that in the table. I think I don't take away from the chair's question, but it's helpful to see it set out in that way.
But I think it would be useful to have two parts to the answer. One is, can you clarify whoever's going to apply? Can you clarify, make it understandable? And then the other thing is, why did we take it? Didn't we do? Was that the best course in hindsight?
So, well, do you want to make a comment?
One question. On page 78. And there it says time limited post and development cost to deliver replacement parking base suspension IT system. Is that a one-off thing, or is that something that we anticipate coming back in the future? And just if you can explain what it is clearly, also that would be great.
It's the cost of an individual person or a small team of people to implement that IT system.
So it's a
So it is a one-off cost.
So it's an implementation cost.
That's correct. So you've only got a number in one of the three columns, which is the year bid.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you very much. So I think I'm going to draw that to a close. We've made a recommendation about adding an indicator. We perhaps asked for a bit of clarity around some of which will be reflected in the leadership team paper as well, around a couple of items. And there are some queries that we've raised that will be answered online. Thank you very much for helping us go through that in such detail. I think Will's point about, underlying concern, I know they're ones that you share, but just to sort of re-emphasise that, the trends look as if they're going in the wrong direction in terms of pressures on the budget, nothing to do, just in the environment that we're in, and that the approach needs to be, that we need to hasten the transformation process so that we can see a clearer way out of these pressures.
And the transformations need to be more than just trying to attempt cost cutting.
Yes, thank you very much. So now I'm going to ask David, who has been patiently waiting to come and talk with Johnny about it's very clear, if I can say so. I hope the rest of the committee agrees with me, but I thought this is a very clear and concise paper. Actually, it's much appreciated by the committee. You want to do an introduction, I think?
Hopefully it's so clear as we started the planetary, but any questions? Yeah.
Well, let's start with Will, because I made him wait till the end.
Okay, right. That's all right. Fair enough. It seems a complex and council critical plan to complete this job within 6 months. And certainly I can witness from other places that this new directive is putting the fear of God into all sorts of organisations, not just councils. And we have 6 months, minus Easter and summer breaks. So in the committee, it would be good to hear more of how you will project manage the process, and whether it would be a good idea for us to receive a further report in 3 months' time, because that would seem to be, by that time, you'd know whether you're going to hit 6 months or not.
To take the last point first, absolutely happy to do that. So I think from my point of view, there are a number of things we've been working on for a period of months now. knowing the procurement bill as it was going through Parliament was going to become enacted in the autumn. We're still actually awaiting the secondary legislation to be laid. So the detail isn't available yet, but we expect that to come in March. But what we have been doing is preparing the ground in a number of ways. So we've made sure we've got a much better handle on our contract register, which has been a problem for some time. So we now have all the contracts that we know should be on the contract register, which is making sure we've got all the data that sits behind each of those contracts. So when we have to publish going forward, we've got all the detail there. That's the work the team is doing now. We're developing the pipeline, so the council, as with others, will have to publish an annual pipeline of procurements it's going to undertake. If it doesn't do so, it will struggle to actually undertake those procurements. We've got a list of officers who need to be trained in terms of procurement and contract management. So again, the legislation is clear that people can only undertake procurements if they have the training and been certified. The government is currently developing a training programme to roll out nationally. Officers from my team are actually involved in providing feedback and testing on that training, which is helpful. We know that will be coming out in March, April time. There are some potentially some, as with government systems and rollouts, some potential issues around whether the whole country will have actions at the same time. So there may be a phased rollout. We're working on material there to help officers internally to do that. We've got some funding for contract management training through central government as well, which we've given to 15 of our top contract managers in the council to make sure that they're up to speed. We're working through with colleagues in legal services around the changes we're going to need to make to our policies and procedures, to the templates and the notices we'll need to publish. You'll see in one of the appendices there are a lot more notices we'll need to publish going forward around the written stage of the procurement process. We've got a steering group of officers across the directorates to make sure there's good engagement with all the teams across the council and to make sure that there's awareness about the act and what's coming and the training. And that group has been helpful in gathering that contract register data. And when we need to be working next on, and for me the key priority and to get some of your feedback here, is the kind of reporting these to EMT, to audit committee, and to the overall scrutiny committee. So I think we're in a good place now, given what we know. The next test with colleagues in legal services is when the second legislation comes out next month. But I'm comfortable at this stage we're in the right place with the resourcing in the team being enhanced to be able to help us meet these challenges.
Thank you for that. And supplementary is this is to do with procurement, which is to do with contracts, and in contracts as a counterparty. Do you expect the counterparty people, entities ranging from Western Riverside Waste Authority to say the BCS organisations and people who do contracting for catering for schools? Do you expect them to be up to speed by the due date as well?
So what we will be doing is when we have that further detail on the second legislation, it's actually producing some material to be able to share with our existing supplier base and potential suppliers. So we recognise a key piece of work for us actually in terms of procurement generally is how we can engage better with the market. So we get better bids, better value, better outcomes. So I think this is a key opportunity for us to be able to do that better. And with strengthening the team, we'll have the opportunity to do that more. So we're looking at how through the pipeline, suppliers know that something is coming down the line. We can then start working with that sector to say, right, these are the kind of proposals we have, get their input more at an earlier stage into what we're doing, but also look at how we can involve small and medium-sized enterprises, either bidding directly for work, because they have to publish contracts over 30,000 there, and also to get them engaged with some of the larger suppliers, so sort of consortium basis as well. So I think there's lots of work for us to do, lots of opportunities to make sure that's a lot better than it has been. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One.
Yes, thank you. Two questions, please. One is, with all this undertaking trade, first of all, it's a very good report and it's a very lovely report to read, because some of these things you read, go, oh my God, my brains are freezing.
I big 16 pages, but it's very on.
Yeah, but so no, well, thank you for that. But with the training, that cost, is it paid by the government or paid by us?
So the training is provided nationally by government, paid for by government. Obviously, when we have new people coming on board, there'll be an issue there that we'll need to deal with. But that we'll have the staff trained in large numbers, and my team in particular will be able to deliver training then and cascade training. So I think I'm comfortable in terms of cost now. There's time, but not cost. It's important we invest the time and get directors to make sure their staff invest the time in the training now. And then we'll follow up with training and then refresher training on a regular basis. And again, doing some more work around spot checks to make sure that actually the trainings have the right effect. So again, not just saying, here's the training, off you go. How do we follow through and make sure we've got that assurance that training is having the right effect?
Okay. And my second question is, you earlier talked about better delivery, better service. Is it cheaper? Will it be cheaper in the long run?
So part of the task for my team is, in terms of the growth that's going in the budget to council next week, is to actually help to deliver savings across the directorates. And part of that is around how do we commission services better. So that will be looking at what's being done elsewhere, learning from good practice, looking at how we can be more innovative, and again, engaging suppliers to work out with them, how do we get a better cost as well as a better outcome for the service we're trying to contract. So again, these are skills we want to develop within the council to make sure we do both get better outcomes, but actually at a reduced cost.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Chair. And just one quick question. Thank you for the report. Insurance. When we contract with a SME or a small supplier who then goes bust, how does the council protect itself to make sure that we get revenue in to actually go elsewhere? Or if there's some form of fraud or problem with a contract or procurement, we can get covered from an insurance perspective?
So obviously, when we go out to tender for any contract, we look to the bidders to have appropriate insurance cover in place. So if there's a potential loss to the council, we look to recover through their insurance. And I think, in terms of replacing, if a supplier goes bust, typically it's about getting another supplier in. So there may be some additional costs which we look to recover, but we want to make sure that business continuity plans are in place, for example, the services are able to go to other suppliers quickly if there's a problem. But we do make sure at the beginning that the appropriate insurance cover is in place for the nature and the scale and the size of the service.
Okay, so and because that's been paid for and is put in place by the suppliers,
yes, yeah,
we obviously don't control that. So to the extent that that contract either hasn't had the premiums paid or has an excess, which means that we can't claim on it, how do we protect ourselves in that regard?
So I suppose there, through contract management, what we do is make sure that the insurance coverage continues. We make sure the contract managers are doing due diligence on the contractors as well to make sure that there aren't any issues around financial performance or financial stability. And again, there's work we're doing with contract managers to try and improve that. And I think through the kind of reporting and engagement, what's going to lead members and this committee is how we pick some of the larger contracts in particular to see that as well, because they're the ones that could really cause the council and residents lots of problems if those contracts were to be in jeopardy. So I think it's been proportionate in terms of the nature of the contract, in terms of having diligence from the contract managers to be checking these things on a regular basis.
Thank you. And perhaps that's a suggestion for a KPI in future is how many companies that we've contracted with have gone bust and how much does it cost us in any period. Great.
Thanks very much, Mary. Just going back to earlier points at 5.6 and in more detail at 5.41 and 4.2 and also elsewhere, I would infer that the risk of this work stream is ensuring that we have enough trained personnel to undertake procurement functions at a time when presumably every other local authority and other bodies are going through the same exercise. So how confident are you that we're going to come out at the other end with the right numbers, the right upskilled staff, and where does that risk sit in terms of likelihood and impact at the moment we're on this table at the moment?
So I think internally we've got lots of good mitigation to make sure we're training staff up who are involved in procurement. So I think that's okay. You're right, there is a small pool and other professions in local government in particular where it can be difficult to recruit. We've just been through a recruitment in the last couple of weeks around the senior commercial manager role, which is the layer below the head of service, and appointed two successful appointments, one internal, one external. So I'm confident actually, over time we will build up a team to where it needs to be and to recruit the right staff to do it. But it is a challenging market. But in terms of the impact would be high if we didn't. I think the likelihood is perhaps medium to low. I think we've got a good offer in terms of what we're doing at Kensington and Chelsea, and then we will attract people in, and we'll continue to attract people in, I think.
And in terms of the level of skill, I'm very important to a different government department when I was working in the MOD, and the commercial officers, qualified commercial officers were a critical part.
Yes.
Is this some kind of equivalent level of qualification to that?
It is, yes. And I think we've got, within the strategic team, we've got a number of commercial specialists who are well trained, well qualified, but also in the directorates, particularly in housing management. They've got a really good team there as well. I mean, they're delivering around half the contracts the council holds because of the capital programme and the repairs contracts. So again, we've got, I think, that a good skill set among officers who are in place already.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Lucy, have you got any questions?
Well, actually, that's my question, but I was going to echo what Wella said and say that it was a very easy paper to read.
That is high praise indeed. Claire,
I don't have any further questions than what's been asked. Thank you.
Portia.
Thank you. Very detailed report. I understand. Thank you.
Well, you'll be unsurprised to have just a few questions. What would you say your percentage level of confidence is that we have actually now recorded all our contracts? Because we know how difficult a job that was.
Yeah, so I think we're about 95 to 97%. The last bit we're doing is just correlating it back to the forward plan and all the decisions that have been taken previously, just to make sure we double check to make sure we've got everything.
And have we correlated it to the ledger as well?
Yes, that's already been done. Yeah.
And you talked at one stage about, well, you've mentioned that we've re-procured the software because HMS wasn't up to it, and that we've diverged from Westminster. Is that because we are being less demanding and less stringent than Westminster? How would you characterise the difference in requirement between
So
us?
I think we have a different model in terms of procurement to Westminster. So we will have, when the growth bid goes through a team of 14 in the strategic procurement team here, they have in the region of 70 people. At Westminster, they do lots of the procurement centrally. That their requirements for reporting are quite significant, and they're quite well advanced in terms of contract management and contract management tracking and reporting. And so the functionality they wanted was far in excess of what we were looking for. I think here we wanted to make sure, first of all, we get the e-tendering absolutely right and used 100% of the time, and that we then developed a contract management side in a way that's proportionate to what RBKC's needs are. So I think we work closely with Westminster colleagues to make sure for by-borough procurements that we've got absolute visibility and influence in terms of the work that's being done, led by them, for by-borough contracts that includes RBKC contracts, but making sure that we've got something that's fit for purpose and proportionate and cost effective for RBKC. So that's something, given the scale and nature of the way we do procurement.
I suppose time will tell if those reports, contract monitoring reports, actually do satisfy us. But I can see that there's also a temptation to ask for too much information that you don't need. In 5.37, I'm really pleased to see that I'm sorry, I'm banged on the back there, but the top 5 contracts will be discussed with a relevant lead member, and I'm sure we will want those discussions to be part of our KPI reports in future. I just wonder if the top 5 is a blunt instrument in the sense that directorates don't vary enormously and how much and what type of contract they depend on. Some are much more dependent, or they have only one big contract. And I'd like your reflections on that.
So I think for me, top 5 doesn't just mean value. So there's a danger you have all the capital contracts and all the high value revenue contracts at the top. It's looking at some of the risk and complexity and sort of resident impacts for some of these contracts. They may be lower in value, but much higher in terms of impact on residents' outcomes. So I guess making sure that we've got that mix, both for the lead members and for you as a scrutiny committee. So you don't just get a whole lot of capital contracts or a whole lot of waste contracts. You get a mix of contracts that reflects the needs of residents in the borough.
You've also talked in this paper about how some of the new government requirements are optional and some of them are mandatory. How and when are we going to decide which stages optional stages we're going to adopt and which ones we're going to reject as burdensome and not very helpful?
Yeah, so I think things like the pre-market engagement notice is something that on larger contracts, or where we're in the past, what we've done is look to have what's called a prior information notice, where we say to the market, we're looking at procuring this kind of service. We're not completely wedded yet to a particular way of having that service delivered. We'd like to know from you as a market what you want how you can help us with this. So a preliminary market engagement notice is very much that kind of thing, where we say to the market, help us to shape the specification and help us to get the savings, to get the best outcomes. So there'll be times when that's appropriate to use and times when it's not. So I think it will be on a case by case basis on the optional notice where we get better benefit, better impact from doing that.
Okay. And you've asked us about for some input onto the KPIs and so on, and I'm going to sort of answer after from that. But I do think that one thing that's often been missing from our reporting, and I would urge is people, when we exert sanctions, we know about it. Because I think there's a suspicion that may be justified that we don't do that enough, that we let it slide, and that relationships become too sort of relationship dependent and nobody wants to rock the boat. I don't mean that in any kind of disreputable fashion, but just there is a temptation to sort of be growing up about things, and actually sometimes we do need to wield a big stick. And I think we'd all like to see that reported as one of the KPI, well, not a KPI, but as a factor on those contracts.
I think parallel to that, and working perhaps with that, is that are many occasions, particularly for instance, the BCS sector, that we work alongside train some of our contractors on how to manage their finances or manage their government or whatever it happens to be as well. So it's sort of that's, I suppose, the spend to save area. But that works alongside, not instead of. No.
I think there's two aspects in there. There's the bit about actually showing to suppliers that we take the contract seriously and want to deliver. And we'll use the levers when they're there. The other bit is how we learn as an organisation, help contract managers to learn how to do that and how to make sure they get the best out of their contracts. I think it's a value in both. I think some of the benefits of the greater transparency that the Act gives, including publishing contracts and performance KPIs, will drive authorities to be more challenging in terms of the way they apply some of those levers going forward.
To be welcomed, I'm assuming that there are some benefits to the legislation, and that that's what they're certainly designed to be. Those are all my questions. If there's something else in the committee, I think you can rest assured that we think this is a very important development, and that we're anxious that you have all the right resources. You've reassured us that you have made a few recommendations about the reporting and being a bit more transparent on our sanctions and use of them. And I think the request is that you do come back in 3 months with a progress report. And that also my suspicion is that the scrutiny committees will want to see the same reports on the top 5 or top however many contracts, along with their other suite of performance indicators on an annual or regular basis. Sorry, thank you both very much. That's
it for us.
Yeah, it's going to time.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's move on to page 8. Am I right? 8, 7, 8, 9, you're on. Good. So this is where we talk through the program of key decisions to pick up any that we think we have identified for having either further information or looking at within our smaller committees. So I'm just going to pull the pages through. Well, in some cases we have already constantly run. So, or in fact, I'm going to do them by group. So by leadership team, yes, that's pages 1, 2, 3. Will, do I hear you?
I got one of Paul.
Paul, and I'll say Paul. Okay.
Right, okay, but it comes back to this medium-term financial strategy 25, 27, 28. This still scheduled to come to overview of the scrutiny committee. The question is, Jackie, what is still here? Will this include an assessment of the impact of the transformation implementation? That's not just the establishment of transformations of policy, the implementation of transformations, because we need those in place to enable the 25-6 budget, and the formation of that budget will start happening September onwards. So, progress report in the summer, July 3rd, according to this date here, would be really useful to get some, maybe it's Maxine question, I don't know if it's Maxine, but some, not only to come back to us in March and tell us a bit about what you're intending to do, but how far you've got by July.
So maybe that's a request to Jackie to see if that can happen. Sorry, to respond.
Thank you. So when we come in March with the transformation strategy, what we could do then is bring
put on examples, so like our customer access work, to see how the transformation that you've seen previously, what it's actually delivering in terms of resident experience and also savings. And then, I mean, we can do that again in July, but I sort of suggest that in March, we might be going to do a forward look and a bit of a backward look as well.
Thank you very much. It's just that it's so critical to the ability to form a reasonable view of a budget in September onwards. And also we would ask, and I don't know whether I'm going to be involved in this particular role, but if I am, what I would hope is that we start getting more financial information earlier, and to highlight one that in sync with all the others, HRA is in sync with all the other budget areas.
Yes.
I can't see why the budget HRA find it more difficult than ASC, because ASC must be more difficult in terms of looking at what the
Thank you,
government's
Greg.
Yes, on the leadership team, two of those annual resilience report. That so is a question for you there, really. Should that be something we ought to be considering?
Which page are we on? Sorry.
Page 1 of the.
If we do, we need to look at it outside of the meeting, because your next meeting is the 21st of March. So we could ask to have it circulated for your comments, but you wouldn't be able to consider it in the meeting.
I mean, I don't know.
Let's do that.
Yeah, if you think we ought, I mean, I'm not sure. I generally don't know if we ought to do that or not.
So we could ask for the leadership team report.
The
circulated.
other one that in that section was interesting. I think on page 4, options for vacant rent for required properties, it's probably got a value associated with that. So maybe that's something that we ought to have a look at.
I've spoken to Helen today to ask for some more information for that, because I thought that you would be interested.
Yeah, but I mean, it's probably an HSC thing rather than an OSC thing, but.
Yeah, it's for your committee, I spoke to them, for your plan committee. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, page 5. Yes.
I've got one, but it ties into on page 3 and 2, which are actually one of them is leadership team and one of them is lead member housing. Basically, we have some degree of concern among residents concerning the variation of tenancy dealing conditions, the housing strategy, and the tenancy strategy. So I would like to perhaps maybe think about these coming to.
Haven't we done the variation of tenancy agreement already?
That was the consultation came and the decision is in progress. And I feel that residents would appreciate.
I think Jackie locked us in.
No, I didn't. I couldn't get out.
Oops. We are definitely locked in. Right. Get on with it, please.
Yes, I feel that residents would appreciate as much assurance as we can get. So maybe if it were just to be a report that came and it didn't have to be within a meeting, but I think the committee definitely should be keeping a close eye on each of those 3 things.
So, okay, so we'll do that, not review the key decision again, but have that's a request for a separate report. Okay, page 5, page 6. 7.
Lucy, report.
Which one?
We've got a report for the do a new contract for care home services.
Is the home care one on page 6?
Yes.
I think James has been talking to colleagues about you maybe getting something on that one for September meeting. Obviously,
it's not
use the share. So James has got something he's looking at. I think it's that one.
So James is doing it, I think.
Yeah.
No.
If you have looked
We'll
at it,
definitely
basically.
keep you out of that. We'll try and think as soon as it can.
Okay.
The only thing I was going to note was
Sorry, Maz. He's going to talk to you, Lucy, about it.
I can keep you updated. I was just going to say that I think the learning disability plan 2023, we had that at the committee last time at the beginning of February, so I don't know if that needs to be added into the box.
Yeah. I would like SDN as well, mental service with an outreach.
Sorry, which one?
Oh, sorry, Chair. Page 7.
Yeah. SDN.
Yeah, SDR. But it says not before the 6th of March, so maybe we'll have to wait until the 6th of March.
Well, if you want to look at it before they award the direct award, you would have to look at it before.
Okay.
But I'm not sure how much scrutiny there'll be to do that, because it's under contracts. I'm not saying you can't do it, but
Is this one to circulate for,
Yeah.
yeah, to circulate rather than put on the agenda? Are you
Yeah.
happy with
we
that?
don't have a meeting. We don't have a meeting now.
Thank you. Okay, 7, that's page 8. 9. 10. 11.
Might probably move on.
Oh, that's more me.
That looks like a bit of gold plating of the law in their care experience one. So,
Which one?
care experience.
Yeah.
Coming out. Not that we should look up for our care leaders, of course, but deputy characteristic is something that's defined in law, and that isn't. So that looks like something quite contentious that probably ought to be discussed.
Joking. Well, that's going to have to happen quickly because it's down for due date of February the 24th. So again, get that circulated. But
Yeah.
this is the improvement in the dates. So I think that's come on very new.
So if it's come on very new, we haven't got time to. We don't have time to sort of.
Well, it's
do it.
Well, if we circulate it, you could submit comments to the leadership team.
Yeah, to the league member. It's a league member decision.
And would that be this committee or would it be Waller's committee? Because it's I don't have a view one way or the other on that, but it's just something that I spotted as an elephant trap.
I don't know if Lisa could help with this because it's to do with the extension of the council tax exemption.
But I see.
The first I've seen.
So it's part of the budget, I think.
Yes.
If I'm mistaken.
I thought it was a good idea, but that's,
But maybe included in the council. Well, it can't be with league member decision, but got some connection to the budget.
it is a league member decision for families and children's services.
Yeah.
So,
for the lead member.
so shall we? So I think probably FCS and OSC we could circulate it to.
Yes, but I'm not sure what stage that one's at. It could be very close to being taken.
And if it's very close to being taken, Jackie, this is the first time we've seen it. So that's saying something about the about how the leadership process is working and the leadership of truth and scrutiny.
Okay.
If we're only seeing it now, and it's almost too late.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the first mention of it I've seen, but it's certainly the first time I've seen it in the key decision list.
Okay.
So noted. And actually that's possibly another thing we should put on the tracker, the date that it was added to the tracker.
Yeah.
I think.
We can do, yeah. Talk to colleagues about getting that college. I've seen something about that today. I'm sure that.
Okay, page 12. 13. 14, you look poised, well.
Well, it's just that I'm curious about the final set supply and installation borough-wide hazard contract. The reason I'm curious about that is not that we shouldn't be doing, obviously, those things we absolutely should be doing. There have been so many reports we've received previously about the progress of assessing and replacing fire doors. That this is a decision about presumably purchasing some fire doors. How are we up to date on where we've got to in terms of what proportion of our housing stock is now compliant?
I thought we were.
Well, I thought we, yeah, and this,
I thought we were all compliant.
that's my memory, because we're all compliant, so why do we need to buy more doors? Is it because of replacement of doors that are now becoming too old?
Is that about,
Or is it just an out of date decision? Jackie, it says March 23, is this one that's just happened?
No, if it's March 23, that means that relates back to the date that it was put on the forward plan. I don't know which page you're on.
14.
14.
Middle of
So fire doors, yeah, so housing and communities have looked at this very thoroughly. Yeah. And will confirm. We did circulate after the last meeting. Callum sent round a link to the paper. Because that was requested.
I apologise for not reading it, if that's the answer, but could we clarify as to whether this is a new phase of fire proportion has been done or the completion of existing fire.
So possibly
I
the
think
nice
it's the
way.
existing phase three, isn't it? I think so. And
But
to find out.
maybe refer to the paper and then if you've got any further questions.
Yeah, so please, Jackie, could you
Yeah.
point in the directions paper?
Will do.
Sydney.
In fact, you can put all of us maybe.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Chair.
all these weeks, the whole committee, yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I asked, because obviously I'm not on the housing select committee, was whether we were able to put the total number of doors and how many doors have been completed.
Yeah.
Whether
Well,
that's the
that's
statement, and I asked that.
That should be in that report.
It may well be in the report, but I asked
Yeah,
it
you got-
specifically here because I don't sit on that committee.
Yeah, we got
I'm sorry.
7,500.
But that's good.
Flats. And then have we done them all or half of them all?
Yeah.
You know.
Let's see if the paper answers that question, and if it doesn't, we can ask for it to be formally asked. 15. 16. 17. 18. 19. 20. 21. 22. 3. 4, 25. 6, 27. Okay. And we can add on that, we move on to agenda item 8, which is the work programme. We want to read zoning adjustments. Have we reviewed it?
We've made some adjustments, we've only got one item, but you've got some items on the horizon that you may wish to bring forward. So now it's like the review of the year, including budget scrutiny, and then underneath we've got items to be scheduled. Right.
Do we need to make decisions on those now?
No, think about it, let me know, and I'll take officers.
So if everyone can have a look on the items rescheduled. Of course, we can add on the else.
Can I ask a question?
Please, go on.
So for the 27th of March, the Grenfell item.
It won't be the 21st.
It's now,
It could be the 21st. Could be the 21st.
21st, yeah. I had some comments at the Housing's Community Scrutiny Committee on the reporting of delivery reach and impact of the Grenfell recovery programme. Should I write being the author of that report to ensure that those comments are taken on board?
Or were they automatically passed on?
Yeah, what happened to the comments? Do you know? Were they, was it at your last meeting? Yes. So they'll be in the minutes are being drafted, aren't they? Yeah, at the moment. That's right. So we can forward those. Yes, to the.
Once you've checked the minutes.
Yeah, when you're happy with that it captures.
Then
what
we
you
can forward
said.
the minutes to them.
Yeah.
So that specifically.
Time for them needs to be the report, because the report that came to us, they said some of it was actually taken from older reports, and I was particularly concerned about the use of phrase the rewriting of history, because what happened actually is still very sensitive. So I don't want to see that happen again at this meeting.
I think the solution suggested is you agree the minutes.
Yeah.
We'll forward the minutes saying, please note in particular, or the report.
Excellent. So we can do that. That's thank you.
Yeah, I think that brings our meeting to a close unless there's any urgent business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I'm just asking Callum because I've looked up that care experience characteristic. I don't think that's going soon.
Mary, Jackie, the only thing I was a bit concerned about, we don't have an AFC till May.
No.
Is what's happening with GPs. I mean, we're not going to be able to bring that as an emergency item. And that's
Same with GPs.
they're changing the same day service, which
You won't be able to see a GP.
which is full time
the same thing.
So which would be an, I mean, I don't know how, sorry, I mean, the meeting is how we go about doing something about that.
So people will no longer